play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Dying for a moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic. On the other side, Dylan Burkhart, Hoops. What up, Dylan?
What's going on? You made it to New Jersey, and we got a lot of basketball to break down this week.
I'm in the dirty Jers. That's what we call it out this way.
I don't know if that's going to stick.
East Coast buckets, man. This is what I'm here for. Big one tomorrow. Michigan State, Seton Hall. Top 15 game, right? What's Seton Hall, like 12 or something like that in the AP?
Sounds about right.
Whatever. But marquee early season game for sure. Last night, this is the Gavitt Games edition of the Moving Screen pod. Last night, Michigan-Creighton in Ann Arbor. I was there. Dylan was watching and charting from home. And we're going to open up with that and then offer a full preview of Michigan State Seton Hall. So, Spartan fans, hang on. We've both dug into that one. We have a lot to say. So, that's going to be on the back half of the show. But we'll start with the Wolverines.
So if this is a Gavitt Games edition, do we have to do a little 5-minute segment about how great Gavitt was for the game of basketball, or can we skip that? That's only in the broadcast.
I think we can skip that. It is. You're getting tired of all the love for.
I'm all for it, but I love the Gavitt Games. I think it's worked out really well. Are you a fan of the Gavitt Games? Do you like them being played?
Gavitt himself was definitely a legend, and
See, there we go. I knew you could bring it.
It's always been interesting trying to shoehorn college basketball into attention. He had a big part in it, but I've loved it because I think the two conferences are relatively comparable in style of play. I think it's a very natural matchup. Big East teams versus Big Ten teams, just in terms of how they play. I think it's a good kind of crossroads. Whereas, Big 12 basketball or something like that, it's just kind of a different brand of hoop.
Yeah, I also feel like they're games that weren't really scheduled very often in the past. Like, you don't see a lot of home and homes previously with Big East teams and Big Ten teams, I feel like, at least from my general perception. So I think it's kind of fun to see some new matchups that we might not see all that often, right?
And most importantly, yes, the fact that these are on-campus, non-conference games, which I will lobby for until I'm blue in the face. The tournaments are good in terms of matchups, but the game's meant to be played on campus, not in front of high school gyms with 1,500 people in there. So, these are great. I'll be really curious to kind of see tomorrow's atmosphere. Seton Hall is such a weird program, and it kind of rents Prudential Center out here in Newark, but they had to play their first two games on campus at Old Walsh Gym. It's 2,000 seats. They had to play those two games. Last night at Chrysler, if I'm Michigan, I would be not thrilled with. I thought the turnout was pretty weak. I thought the atmosphere was pretty weak. They're going to have to dial things up here a little bit, which is we can just basically package this conversation and have it probably November 13th of every year, it seems.
Yeah, I think if you're hoping for a great atmosphere, early November, Michigan State football week in a snowstorm, well, you're going to be hoping for a while. I don't know if that's never really been the week that really draws big. I feel like basketball season kind of starts for a lot of Michigan fans around the Big Ten ACC Challenge, right? Like that's usually the first big crowd when there's a big game in there.
It's definitely in December, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'll still mock them for it, though.
Go. That's fine. You can do what you have to do, man. Should we talk a little bit about that game?
Yes, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I thought it was, first of all, really good win. Put up 79 points against a solid, I consider Creighton pretty much a high major program. It's a relatively stable presence in the NCAA tournament. Good program, good coach. I think their talent level is probably a touchdown this year, but good team that will probably be a middle of the pack in the Big East. And but more importantly, considering the way that the opener ended for Michigan, there were a lot of positives to take from this.
It was a game that Michigan could not really afford to lose.
Fair.
If you lose that game, you're playing uphill for the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? You are trying to make up ground in places where it's not really going to be easy to make up ground. You don't want to have to go to Louisville and steal a win. You don't want to have to go on some heroic run through the battle for Atlantis.
Right.
It's the toughest tournament field in the early season. So you have to take care of business. You have to win at home, and it's not going to change anything, but it's going to put you in a spot where you're still where you want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Home losses are killer. Home wins are, you get a pat in the back and you move on. And Michigan, I think, can take a lot of positives away from that, just as far as how they adjusted, how they really played overall, despite kind of some early ugly defensive issues.
I kind of feel like the second half of that game is going to be the, circle it, see if they can replicate that as often as possible, because that was winning basketball. And in the first half, for the majority of it, I'm sitting there thinking, all right, they're making all these threes. That's all well and good, but I can circle about 5 categories that are going to bite them in the ass when these threes stop falling. Everything from rebounds to, I thought, some defensive breakdowns. Like Creighton missed a lot of shots early that I think could have maybe pushed this game in a different direction, maybe in the first 10 minutes. But those didn't fall, and some of that is to do with the shots that Michigan was giving them. Others had to do with just shots that didn't go in, open shots that just didn't fall. While Michigan, the Julius hitting step backs in the corner, they make 7 first half threes, I think.
I think that's the right number.
That kind of kept them above water when the rebounding was awful, and the defense I thought was pedestrian. But then the second half was terrific.
Michigan played poor enough defense in the first 15 to 20 minutes that it could have lost the game if it doesn't shoot the lights out, right? I mean, if they're not making all those threes, remember, they made all those threes and they were losing at halftime.
Right.
The defense was that bad. So they survived by kind of playing above their weight on offense, but it really just bought them time to make some defensive corrections and shore up some of those issues where they were really struggling. And a lot of it was the defensive rebounding. Creighton rebounded 44% of its missed shots, which is what you have to remember here is Creighton is not a team that crashes the offensive glass. Mm-hmm. They're basically a perimeter-oriented team that plays kind of how Michigan used to, where they want to shoot a lot of threes. They want to not really worry about offensive rebounding, try not to turn it over, and just go about their business. I don't know how to figure out exactly why all those offensive rebounds happened. I think they were any number of reasons. There were some where it was just one-on-one, someone gets beat to the ball, vertically, horizontally, whatever. But there were also a lot that were odd bounces, long rebounds. There were a couple of 3 offensive rebounds on one play, kind of tipping it back and forth. So there was some weird stuff going on, but that's something that Michigan has been really exceptional at, defensive rebounding, for the last 2 years, probably, I would say. Yeah. And if you're not cleaning up the defensive glass against Creighton, you're going to have bigger issues if you can't get that figured out.
Because you want to talk about how bad the first half was. Like that was all game. The rebound. There was that one possession in the second half. Creighton's going to watch that game film and be pretty pissed off. In the second half, they didn't take advantage of that stretch when Zavier Simpson was out with fouls. And then they had that one key possession where they had like 4 different attempts at getting a bucket. It was offensive rebound, new set, and came up empty. And those are things that can change the game. Like, was Michigan's defense better in the second half? No doubt. The rebounding wasn't, but the offense was outstanding. Shot 60% from the field, wasn't reliant on threes. They only attempted 7, I think. 7 threes in the second half.
Yeah, so Michigan shot 70% on twos, which is a ridiculous number.
Right.
We always talked about that as a stat that gauges how effectively an offense is working, right? You're getting to your spots, you're finding the open guy, you're moving the ball. If you're just getting layups all the time, you're probably playing winning basketball. And that all came down to Zavier Simpson with how he was just controlling the game out of ball screens, and he was passing guys into free buckets up and down the court, right? Mm-hmm. And that's good news for Michigan in the sense that in that opener, Zavier Simpson didn't really look like Zavier Simpson. He looked out of sorts. He was turning it over, passing it where passes weren't there. And if you have Zavier Simpson that can play like this, played like this throughout most of last season, he's going to just win you games like this quite a bit. And he was really the entire offense, I would say, for the most part.
Yeah. There's a couple things here. First of all, I'll be actually, let's start with Zavier, because I thought what you wrote today, that top piece of your 5 observations from the game was just terrific in terms of kind of breaking down what Zavier Simpson is versus what Zavier Simpson is portrayed as, and some of the numbers you had in terms of their efficiency out of pass out or on pass outs out of ball screens is just, I don't know what it is comparatively because, you'd have to chart that up, which I'm sure you're more than capable of, but it just is pretty mind-boggling in terms of what they're able to do when he is directing kind of that initial action. Right. Mm-hmm. Tell the folks about it, bro, and then tell them to subscribe.
So Simpson was the number 3 leading scorer in college basketball last year in terms of points created for other people out of ball screens. Mm-hmm. And that's a guy who a lot of people look at Michigan last year and they think the offense had to do with Brazdakis, had to do with Jordan Poole, had to do with this. Zavier Simpson was really the brains and the engine behind all of that. And I think it's pretty obvious that he is capable of creating that leverage where Michigan has a player in an advantageous situation where they can get downhill. He's created the advantage for them, right? And that's something that you sometimes miss when you watch the game, but it's really quite clear when you just look at how Michigan's production kind of goes. And it's really impressive. I don't have the stat pulled up, but I think he had like 1.8 points per play when he found someone out of ball screens, which is a ridiculous stat, especially when you consider his volume. And last night he was finishing too, and he was figuring out ways to score, which is just something that Michigan needs more this year than last year, I would say.
When it comes to Zavier and what the stuff they're doing now, he's learning a new offense in real time. I'm very curious. Obviously, the 2-man game with him and Teskey, when they're on the same page, looks great. I'll be really curious to see as more and more tape comes out that for opponents to look at what we start to see defensively in terms of what Michigan is facing, because right now, just same as last year, you have the teams that try to avoid chasing Zavier and as best you can sag back and let him just tempt him as much as humanly possible into taking jump shots, because at the end of the day, even if he's making them, it's still in the grand scheme of things a low percentage shot. Do you have any guesses of what adjustments will start to kind of be seen?
I think it's the same thing as last year. You have to, if you're going to, the way to guard Zavier Simpson is to make him beat you by putting the ball in the basket himself. You have to switch everything and then just make him isolate. Mm-hmm. And I think he's probably spent this entire summer trying to improve in those areas. He finished really well. He was getting downhill. But Creighton didn't switch everything, and teams probably aren't going to be as likely to switch everything this early in the season. But once we got to the middle of the Big Ten season last year, you were seeing that because there's just so much on film, and you can't just let him pick you apart and pass it to wide open shooters, to wide open dunkers. And he'll do that if you just play a normal ball screen defense, right? For Michigan, that probably means more pressure on guys like Eli Brooks and David DeJulius to prove themselves as secondary playmakers. Isaiah Livers really showed that he can play out of a ball screen, but he's always going to that jump shot. So, and that's fine.
That's
what
especially
without
especially
Franz.
if they go
in.
And especially without Franz. You need someone to be able to shoot the ball and put it in the basket. They're not. I know that they're scoring not ridiculously high, but they are scoring at a really good clip at the basket. And I think about 40% of their attempts right now are at the basket. But it's still basketball. You need a guy who can shoot. And if Livers shooting like he did last night, I mean, he looked offensively like
he hit shots that I didn't know he had last night.
Best case scenario, right? He did, off the bounce. He had a step-in three.
That step-back three was ridiculous.
Yeah. If he's doing that, if he's looking like that third-team, all Big Ten type kind of caliber player, that Michigan's a different team, and that's when you start talking ceiling.
The ceiling comes down to Franz Wagner being healthy. I think that's pretty obvious from watching this team right now, and I think you can see in the rotation that they are just trying to play the way that they want to play when Franz returns, which I think is really interesting. Adrian Nunez has started both games. He has played about 1 minute in the second half of each half.
Right.
So he's not really – feels like a very NBA-style move to me where you move the guy into the starting lineup who plays the same position even though he might not be one of your best five right now. But you can just see this and you think, man, this could really look like something with a little higher ceiling than you might have thought once you get Franz Wagner back in the game. So that's noticeable when you watch this team right now, I would say, without a doubt, because he's just going to give you more spacing, a little more of that Isaiah Livers kind of shot making.
All right.
Obviously, he has to prove it at this level, though.
No doubt. I also feel like when you talk about that guard play, especially in Franz's absence, a lot of extended minutes with the three guard look, going 6 foot, 6'1", which is just very interesting to see. It's like old school Villanova, except Villanova was doing it with like three NBA guys. But the thing is you watch that second half tape versus the first half tape and just see the difference of, regardless of who you have out there, letting Zavier Simpson dictate 80% of what is actually happening with the ball. It was, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was dramatically different in the second half, whereas in the first half I felt like everyone was just a little fast and loose and a little willing to freelance and take shots that really are just not necessary. Even if they go in, I don't care. Like, it's the second half is what this team needs to be if offensively in the half court. Scoring in transition is great, but if you're going to play in the half court, it's got to be what you saw in the second half.
Yeah, I think that this coaching staff has been pushing guys to play with confidence and take some of those shots, though. So
fair.
I don't know that, like, you see guys like DeJulius, Brooks, who are just more aggressive looking for their offense than they ever really were last year, right? And I don't know that that's a bad thing at this point, especially if it creates a little bit of confidence for guys to make shots, right? I mean, DeJulius needed to finally hit a three in a game, and then he started the rest of his game he played the best game I think he's really played after that. So I don't know that it's terrible, and they clearly want to play a certain way in the first half. What I thought was interesting was that Michigan really did a good job of controlling Creighton's transition game, especially after the first 10 or 15 minutes. Michigan wasn't running up and down the court, taking a three 5 seconds into a possession. Michigan wasn't crashing the glass, and they held Creighton to single-digit transition points. This is a team that loves to just flow into transition threes, and taking that away was something that last year's Michigan team was really good at. Was something that I would probably have said it might be an issue if you are all talking about playing fast. So there's still some of that, I guess, transition defense left over.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan committed 7 second-half turnovers, and Creighton only scored 4 points off of those turnovers. You want to talk about how you erase a halftime lead and win by 10? Being able to do something like that is, without playing perfectly, right? Like, they didn't play a perfect second half. But, yeah, 7 turnovers and only giving up 4 points off them. That's pretty good.
Yeah. The reserve bigs, probably one of the bigger concerns, I would say. Castleton kind of struggled when he was out there. And John Teskey is going to have to play a lot of minutes. He played well overall, I'd say, but he's playing 32 minutes. I don't think that's a huge issue. He showed that he can play those minutes last year, but at least a fair question to ask at this point in the season, probably.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can talk about this probably every single episode until it happens, but, like, Brandon Johns being a guy, like, would really alleviate a lot of these things, because if he can kind of be what people are hoping for, that would then allow Castleton to, maybe play a little bit more at the 5. But right now they're playing him. You didn't break down like rotation minutes or anything, did you?
Castleton played all at the 5 last night.
I thought he played alongside Teskey a little bit.
Teskey played 32 minutes. Castleton played 7.
All right, you might be right.
Because, Creighton's so small. They're playing a 6'4" guard at the 4, so you can't really go big. I just think it's really interesting.
Being, if Brandon can give them, if Brandon can be a legitimate player, it definitely changes minutes, roles, dynamics in that front court, because you got to get something at, it's just, what is he? And I'm not sure.
Yeah, really all the sophomores, and I always want to call them like freshman mistakes and freshmen, because they're really almost like redshirt freshmen at this point. But they are guys who it seems like Michigan might get a little bit of nice production here, a little bit of nice production there, but not really going to know who to lean on, who's going to bring that game in and game out. And that's probably okay at this point in the season. And it does seem like they are all going to get enough chances to kind of grow through that in a way they didn't as freshmen, which is notable.
Yeah, it's going to take time. Everything's taking time on this. I think the best thing that you would say right now, 2 games into this, is like, I don't see any fatal flaws. You know what I mean? No. Of like, there are very few glaring things that you're like, man, this is something that's going to keep this team from being a top 5 type Big Ten. I don't see anything like that. Considering how little we knew of what this thing was going to look like. I definitely think that's a pretty significant positive on November 13th.
Are you at all surprised that Michigan looks further ahead on offense and defense, considering, I guess, Juwan Howard's resume and track record, so to speak?
Probably a little bit. If you asked me this summer, I would have guessed that they were going to be a team that had to win with its defense early on. I probably even said that on this. But at the same time, when you do put Zavier into the equation, it does make sense. I think it would probably be easy just to say, yeah, they're going to, be a better defensive team because that's just what they did. And they have this top flight defensive point guard and a top flight defensive center, so they can lean on that. But a lot of it is going to be understanding assignments, and it does seem like there are moments of confusion right now.
Well, without a doubt. And I think that's twofold, with playing young players with all the sophomores and also just new assignments, right? Yep. So even the returning players who know how to process assignments are still trying to process new assignments. I think that this comes with the caveat that Creighton is generally a pretty horrific defensive team.
Yes.
But Michigan's offense looked pretty good and pretty efficient and well coached and like a team with a plan, which you don't really know when what you're getting this early in the season from a guy who's never been a head coach. And I think the offense is way ahead of what I would have really thought was reasonable, all things considered.
No doubt. There are a number of possessions where that ball is whipping around. And I think that's only going to get better.
Yeah,
just as these guys just start going on instincts more and more and more, I think you could even see the difference from one week to another in terms of this game.
Mm-hmm. And they'll have 2 weeks now, kind of, week and a half, I guess.
Creighton's rotations did suck, though.
Creighton is not good at defense, and really that's a major caveat, because we'll see against better coach teams what this really looks like. But That's an impressive early sign, I would say. And Michigan will have really 2 bye games, and then the games in Atlantis are still 2 weeks away, I think. So some more time to kind of get things in line, so to speak.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear our conversation on December 3rd. Or, I'm sorry, December 4th. But after, you want to talk about defense? Well, they're going to go play at Louisville, and that is... that's a team that's going to defensively look to stuff a lot of teams in closets this year.
That is very fair.
Yeah.
Any other final takeaways on Michigan?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't want to go overboard on saying, man, they're so much better than I thought they were going to. I don't think it's that. This is a game that they were supposed to win. Really, I think it's like going into last night, there was a lot of worst case scenarios.
Yeah,
and they got out of there, right? Which is pretty good early on.
Yeah, there's a chance they went into that game and lost, and they were down at halftime, right? That shows some kind of backbone to bounce back, and
you even saw in the first half people just looking to jump on. Oh my God, it's all over. Michigan basketball's done. Beeline's gone, and no one.
People would never be reactionary on Twitter 10 minutes into a basketball game in November. No way.
People tweeting, "I miss Luke Yaklich." Oh man, the sky's falling. It was pretty funny. He just immediately like, they need a lot of work. Blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, everyone needs a lot of work, man. It's November 13th. Kentucky just lost to Evansville. There's a lot of bad basketball out there.
So. Never. No overreactions to the first 10 minutes of a basketball game ever.
I would say that you talk about the offense, the second half, what the offense was doing and executing. Like, that's the type of stuff that gets more and more buy-in, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
not that anyone on the team was not buying into, what is going on, but you know what I mean? Like, when you
see something work,
when you see it, it's different.
You see it work in an important moment, and then you're in. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Should we get into Michigan State?
Oh, yeah.
Seton Hall?
Oh, I'm ready.
You're ready?
I'm ready for tomorrow night. I think it's going to be highly entertaining. First things first on the agenda, the conversation starts with Myles Powell. We still don't know. If you don't know who Myles Powell is, he's one of the best scorers in the country, a potential first-team All-American, Seton Hall's best player. I think the New York Post reported today that Powell was upgraded to like a game-time decision, although he hasn't practiced yet. But he's got
I think the tweet said he was shooting around or something.
Yeah, he shot on Monday night wearing a boot. And I don't know what he did yesterday. And today he was upgraded to a game-time decision. He changes everything. If he plays, it changes everything. And if he does play, what percentage is he at? I asked someone who is around Seton Hall a lot. Like, I kind of assumed that a lot of this was just a smoke screen. And that Powell's not going to play. But I was told, like, there's legit an actual chance. We'll call it 25%. But if he does play, don't be surprised if he comes off the bench. And how effective is he? I don't know. I mean, it's a dude who averaged 23 points a game last year. He scored 30 or more 8 times. He's on pace to break Terry DeHare's Seton Hall scoring record. Like, it takes a lot of the shine off this game if he is either out or ineffective.
Yes, and we would say probably it sounds like that's going to be the case. And it sounds like there's small to no chance that he'll be fully effective, right?
Can't imagine.
So, it's a high ankle sprain, is that right?
I don't know if I only know his left ankle sprain. I have no idea beyond that. But, like, if he does play, he would definitely be able to at least give them some scoring pop. And the other thing is, he is, like, high level at drawing fouls. And that's kind of my thing that I would circle about, whatever he is tomorrow. That could be something to watch. We saw what foul trouble did to Michigan State against Kentucky. it can go a little sideways rotation wise if guys are kind of battling any kind of foul trouble. So even if Powell is at 70%, I feel like he could still go out there and at least draw fouls on guys and be a kind of dominant figure on offense. Dominant in terms of attention.
That's fair. So you've been in the weeds studying Seton Hall.
Oh, yeah.
How good do you think this team is?
I mean, they're a top 20 team.
Are they a top 15 team? What would you think? Like, so here's my thing.
With
on
a healthy
Seton Hall.
Myles Powell?
Sure. Yeah, I'm talking about in terms of the scope of the whole season.
Yes, they're really deep. They can go 10 deep. They're huge. I mean, their rebounding stats right now are very strange, but
they've played Stony Brook and Wagner,
which is horrible in terms of having
so
rebounding
all of their stats
issues.
are worth nothing. I want to talk about
you can
some of their stats last year.
You can look at their negative stat. Like if you have poor rebounding against Wagner, I almost said Wagner, against Wagner and Stony Brook, like that's an issue. But they've got they've got a ton of size. They're well coached. Kevin Willard. They play their asses off, and I mean,
can we talk some Seton Hall numbers from last year? I just want to throw some things out there. Is that cool?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm not here to defend Seton Hall. I just do think that they are a top 20 team.
All right, finished 60th in KenPom last year, 87th on offense, 60th on defense, outscored in Big East games, last in the Big East in turnover rate. Had a 3-game losing streak and a 4-game losing streak in the Big East last year.
Okay.
Barely got into the NCAA tournament and then lost by 16 to Wofford. Mm-hmm. What makes this team all of a sudden from almost an NIT team to a Sweet 16 team? The fact that they're more experienced?
I'm gonna make the case here. Okay. And this is I'm not trumpeting for Seton Hall, but I'm just here's the case for it though. Last year's team was supposed to suck ass. The fact that they even made the NCAA tournament was shocking to anyone around Seton Hall and the Big East. They lost 4 or 5 starters from the previous year's NCAA tournament team. Basically brought back Myles Powell and a bunch of nobodies, or at least people who no one had really heard of. They have one of the better defensive point guards out there. In terms of hype, I don't know. I haven't broken down Quincy McKnight's defensive film, but the billing on him is that he's a high level defensive player. Myles Powell, I don't know. A legit number 2 scorer. Here's the big thing I think that's different from last year's version to this year's version in terms of perception is that last year it was just Myles Powell. He shot 28% of their total field goal attempts, which is insane. This year's version was supposed to be far more balanced. They've got 2 legit 7-2 centers who are kind of interchangeable. And then the 4-man, Sandro, are you ready?
Hit me with it.
Are you ready for it? Sandro Mamukelashvili. Mamukelashvili.
People come to the Moving Screen podcast just for our pronunciation, so I'm glad you hit that right on the head.
But he's, a 6'10", stretch 4 guy, lefty, good rebounder. I think he was like top 5 rebounder in the Big East last year. They go 10 deep. The 2 sophomores are supposed to take a big step up this year. Jared Rhoden, who's actually kind of a guy who would be stepping in to a larger role if Powell can't play. Anthony Nelson, another sophomore, supposed to take a step up. Torrin Thompson, a Syracuse transfer. They've got a lot of guys who have talent, and they have one of the best scorers in the country. So why wouldn't they be a top 20 team nationally?
Kevin Willard has won more than 10 games in the Big East once. This just strikes me as a team that's going to go 21-10,
He's been
10-8 in the Big East.
I feel like the more apt stat is that Kevin Willard's made 4 straight NCAA tournaments at Seton Hall.
And he's been a 6, 9, 8, and 10 seed. So this is going to be an 8 seed that finishes a game above 500 in the Big East. I just don't see the ceiling of this team. I don't see how all of a sudden this team, which is basically the same as last year's team, just a year older, is going to all of a sudden be a top 15 team that you would say is a contender to make a surprise run to the deep in the tournament, make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
I have no idea what they're going to do in the NCAA tournament, but I'm saying if you're a top 3 team in the Big East and you win 23 games, which this team's probably capable of doing it, you're going to finish the season ranked like 18th or 19th in the country. So they're a top 20 team.
Okay. I'm skeptical. I just think the hype is just too much for this team. I think you know what they're going to be. Pretty good team that is around 500 in the Big East. And maybe a couple wins above that, right? I don't see the ceiling. I don't know. Maybe it's there. I guess we'll see on Thursday night. But I think this is a team that I think Michigan State should beat, and pretty handedly. I just don't know if that can happen on the road so much, and that how significant that plays a factor in your first road game is a fair question.
Yeah, so here's the thing with the whole road game. Look, it's going to be a Seton Hall road game, but at the same time, as of yesterday, there were only like 13,000 tickets sold in a 17,000 seat arena, and I can guarantee you there's probably already 3,000 Michigan State people from like the New York area who've gotten tickets. The fact that of all of the Big East challenge games or a Gavitt game, whatever the hell you want to call it, to not get like a true on-campus game is pretty advantageous. Prudential Center, it's an NBA arena. It's not going to be one of these rocking college venues. So that is obviously in Michigan State's favor. And I don't know, like, just to be able to just to say like, oh, Michigan State should win this game just because they have more talent is probably a bit of a leap. This is one of the bigger, if you read up on Seton Hall, like this is one of like the biggest games in the last 25 years in program history. Like it's a big deal.
There's 4,000 tickets available.
Yes, it's a small Catholic school, man. What do you want?
So, what do you see if Seton Hall is going to beat Michigan State? Where's the advantage? Where's the mismatch?
Well, it has to start at the point guard. What is obviously there's a million things going on with Cassius Winston right now, right? And to be able to analyze what's going on with him, we have no idea. So let's just, for the sake of argument, say that Cassius Winston, and all the other stuff going on, put it to the side, okay? Quincy McKnight is a 6'4", kind of ball hawk defender who I saw him quoted this week as saying, this has been marked on my calendar since the game came out. Like, it's a dude who builds himself on defense. He held Marcus Howard to 2 for 11 shooting last year, 1 for 15 shooting in the Big East tournament. He shut down Shamori Pons. He shut down Anthony Cowan. Like, he's a legit big-time defensive point guard. And he's one of the reasons they made the NCAA tournament last year. He's a little bit limited offensively, but, like, what he does with Cassius Winston, I would say is probably your number one talking point in terms of Seton Hall having a chance here. And then it will be obviously Myles Powell is a caveat in and of himself, but I'd say Seton Hall making threes. They've made like 17 through their first 3 games. And then all this length. They've got a ton of shot blockers in Romaro Gill, 7'2", 255, Iki Obiagu, 7'2", 265, 7'4" wingspan.
Florida State transfer, I think, right?
Yes.
He played against Michigan a few years ago.
Yes. Like, they've got all this at the rim length. And what's been going on with their rebounding in the first 2 games, I don't know. But if they can control the area around the cylinder, I'd probably say would be number, 3 or 4 in what it would take to get the upset here.
Yeah, looking back at their numbers last year, finished 221st in defensive rebounding, despite playing a lot of big guys.
It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it just means they're not a very good rebounding team. They also don't shoot a ton of threes, and they were bad. I think they probably regressed upward from 32% from three last year, but that is a number to look at. And really, Powell is the guy who shoots threes for them. It's Powell and Cale, right? I mean,
yeah, and Cale's been bad to start the year. He got benched to start the second half against Wagner. He was replaced by a kid, Shavar Reynolds, as a junior, former walk-on. Or not against Wagner. I'm sorry. It was the second game against Stony Brook. But
so he got benched in a game when their best player was also already out.
Correct.
Not great. Anthony Nelson, 6'4" guard. He's a really has impressive passing numbers. Not much of a scorer, but could be a guy to look for, kind of operating out of the ball screen more. Just looking at his synergy numbers. He shot 36% on twos and 30% on threes last year, though, so he needs to improve as a scorer, but he can really see the floor. It seems like the big question is just going to be who can step up and make shots on this team. Early on, it seems like most of their offenses come inside, and I don't know how much of that you're going to get against Michigan State, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Even if you're bigger, it's still it's kind of a fool's errand to try to say we're just going to go and we're going to punk Michigan State inside, especially if you're not like Kentucky or a team loaded with pros inside, right?
No doubt.
I mean, they have big guys; they're not pros.
How they handle Tillman defensively in the ball screen will be. I mean, you can pretty much say this in every single game Michigan State plays, but for the sake of this conversation, Seton Hall with here we go, Mamu Kalashvili. He's kind of their stretch four man. I don't know. I imagine he's going to be stuck on Kithier, which means you're going to have one of these 7-2 guys with Tillman. Now, Gill is considered a really high-level shot blocker. People here kind of compare him to like a Samuel Dallenberg type, and he's agile, so I'm guessing he would be the he'd be the starter. He would be probably the primary on Tillman, but it's hard. It's hard to go inside out and kind of chase him around defensively. The kid, the other guy, the dude from Florida State, I think he's kind of more of a lumbering type. But
7'2", 270 pounds.
Yeah,
I think so.
I would think so. So
hard to be fast.
And Gill, so Abiagu started the year as their starting five, and in game 2, Willard flipped the lineup, put Gill as the starter, and he put up like 10 and 10 or something like that in that game. So I think that's still kind of a moving target for them at the 5 spot. There's also been the issue that Seton Hall in the exhibition and the first game, they didn't have Willard. He was suspended for tampering, which is awesome. So the last game that they played was their first game with the head coach.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the on-ball defense with Cassius, and if you can kind of force any sort of turnovers and disruption there, that's probably Seton Hall's best chance. They've forced a lot of turnovers in the first 2 games, almost 25% of possessions, and Cassius has had those turnover issues from time to time in the past. If you can do that, that might give you a chance. But I just have a hard time. You're listing off all these guys, and I'm not sure there's someone who's keeping Tom Izzo up at night about worrying about stopping. Right?
The guy who completely agree. Like I'm telling you all of this. I'm taking Michigan State to win, and if I had to bet the spread, I would take Michigan State to cover.
That's a big number, though. 7.5 points on the road against a team that's supposed to be pretty good. I can't get there with this team. And maybe I'm completely wrong.
But I'm saying gun to the head. Like, if I had to take one, first of all, I wouldn't touch it if I were a betting man. But if I had to, I'll take Michigan State coming out, rocketing and rolling after the week that has been. And as long as Cassius is Cassius, I think they look to make a statement. I just can't imagine this team, after the opportunity missed against Kentucky, a game that really could have easily gone the other way. I think Seton Hall gets the brunt of the payback for them losing that first game.
Yeah, it just sets up. It really sets up perfectly in that regard as far as the situation, and it's Seton Hall is good enough and hyped enough that you can kind of use that to your advantage to say, look, everyone thinks this team's awesome. I mean, they're going to kick your ass too, and then you can go in there and really use that as a motivation tactic. So I like that. I just think it sets up perfectly for Michigan State in this situation, but been wrong before.
Well,
so
and
we'll
number one being Powell.
That's also a key point.
Their first team All-American is, even if he does play, will be hampered
Limited.
at least.
So it's a good chance for Michigan State to pick up a key road win, because if Powell comes back and is healthy later, that win will just get better with time.
It is.
Kind of like Michigan playing against Creighton.
And taking care of this would set them up really nicely. They'd only have one game before going to Maui on November 25th. So they have some time here to kind of reset things, let Cassius deal with all the things that he has to deal with, which, none of us can even comprehend, which is worth remembering. So, get through this game. You play Charleston Southern next Monday, and that's it until the following Monday. They'll, I imagine, fly out to Maui the following Saturday. So they basically have a week to get, out of live game action and go and address things that need to be addressed on and off the court.
Yep. What time is the game on Thursday?
I think it's late. I think it's like an 8:30 tip.
8:30 Fox Sports 1 at the Prue.
You got a little Gus Johnson, got a little Bill Raftery.
Okay.
Yeah, baby. Former Seton Hall head coach, Bill Raftery.
There you go.
That's right. It's been an interesting string of... Seton Hall's a weird program. Can we talk about that? It's like...
You're the East Coast expert over here.
They were kind of, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when it was kind of, natural and normal for the small Catholic schools to kind of be, major players in college basketball. Holy Cross was one of the best programs in the country. Seton Hall was a player then kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of went off the map for decades. There was a point shaving scandal in the 60s somewhere. And then PJ Carlissimo brought them back kind of in that heyday of the Big East. And then they vanished again. And they've been kind of searching for years to kind of find that right recipe of someone who can recruit New Jersey while also recruiting nationally, keep Seton Hall, among the national conversation, which is what so many of those Big East schools are kind of, the non-football schools, your Villanovas, Georgetown, Seton Halls. And then they just had a string of kind of very...
Last coach to get Seton Hall to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament?
Wait, I don't... Okay, hold on a second.
It ties into the pod.
Tommy Amaker?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying...
Almost 20 years ago.
They had a string of pretty random dudes. There were George Blaney was there.
He was there before Tommy.
Bobby Gonzalez. Louis Orr is the head coach there at some point. I think that's most of them. But yeah.
So Seton Hall is not
huge game here.
A protected seed in the Ken Pom era, like a top 5 seed. Does that change this year?
That's the goal, man. Because if they can be a top 4 seed in the East, that would put them through Albany probably in the first and second round, and then they could play at MSG in the regional. East Regional's at Madison Square Garden, which would be pretty big for Seton Hall. It's literally, I could look at New York skyline from my window here. So that would be huge. Does that happen this year with a healthy Myles Powell? I'd say a 4 seed sounds about right for Seton Hall.
This feels like a team that gets a 7 seed, gets shipped out west, loses to Gonzaga in the first weekend, and we never remember again.
Okay, that's fair. You're down on Seton Hall. We'll see.
I'm excited for the game, though. I'm really excited for all the Gavitt games coming up the rest of this week. Ohio State with a really good one against Villanova tonight.
Yeah, Villanova, Ohio State, Purdue, Marquette tonight.
Purdue at Marquette, and then the big one, Providence at Northwestern.
Let's go.
So some good action tonight. I'll be tuning in.
What's the attendance for that at Northwestern tonight for that Providence game?
Ed Cooley and 15 players and maybe a couple hundred fans.
Oh, that's pretty good.
The Ohio State game should be really good
Wait,
test.
doesn't Ohio State... Isn't someone injured? Am I remembering this right?
Wesson.
Andre
the
Wesson.
Smaller Wesson has a broken eye, or like eye socket.
Is he out?
He's out, yeah. The Ohio State has so much depth at that spot. I don't think that's he's obviously a dependable guy, but
right.
It's not like you're digging into a walk-on. You have All-American freshman and Liddell. You have a bunch of wings, so I'm not super worried about that. But if Ohio State is the team everyone's been talking about Ohio State being, they need to beat Villanova at home. And Villanova's the type of team who's good enough to just go and beat you on your home court and make you try to go figure things out again. So that's the one I really want to see this week, I think.
Yeah, for sure. What's the second game? There's another game tomorrow night with Michigan State Seton Hall.
It would be... I don't know. Is there? Georgetown and
Penn State. That could
in
be
Washington, D.C.
That could be a big one for your boys.
The Big Ten needs some teams to step up here a little bit because it has not been a good start to the year.
Do we want to talk about the league being rather ho-hum? Is that the right word? That Illinois-Arizona game was the one that would have been big for the league. That would have been a big win.
They just need
at least be competitive. Don't get waxed.
It was competitive for 20 minutes.
Oh. Well, what the hell does that mean? 20 minutes.
Arizona's pretty good.
Well, no shit.
Arizona looks the real deal.
But the Grand Couches of the world, you got picking Illinois second in the league. You're supposed to be a premier team. What's been the most? How about this one? What's the most disappointing performance you've seen? Non-Iowa DePaul category.
So I can't pick Iowa, and I can't pick Nebraska, and I can't pick Northwestern. Yikes. You're really limiting my options here. Those are basically all the teams that have lost. I would look at I think Purdue losing at home to Texas is a bit of a disappointment. I also think Texas is a pretty good team, though, so yeah, I can see that. But Purdue is kind of like we talked about with Michigan, how you win a home game and you make things easier on yourself. Now Purdue's going to Marquette, and you sort of have to do something, right? You have to make up ground, and that's a tough spot to be in.
Those are like the games that, when it comes to the overall strength of the league and getting bids and the difference between 5 seeds and 7 seeds and things like that, it's games like that. Purdue losing at home to Texas. That's not to put it all on Purdue, and you're right, Texas is good, but like that's like last year. The league won the majority of those kinds of games.
Yeah, but hands down, the worst basketball I've watched this year was Southern Utah at Nebraska. Just awful. And it was painful to watch. And that's going to be a long season for Fred Hoiberg in year one. Not feeling great about my bet. But Northwestern, every time I start feeling down, they bring me back up and make me think I have a chance.
I'm feeling really good about the bet, considering my pick is 0-2 with losses to UC Riverside and Southern Utah. And look out for South Dakota State is going to put it on them.
You picked Northwestern. Northwestern hasn't won a game.
I picked Northwestern? No,
yeah,
I picked
you
Nebraska.
picked Northwestern. I picked Nebraska. You're trying to steal my team.
I thought I picked Nebraska.
No way. We'll have to go back and look at the tape, but I've been on the Nebraska bandwagon, and you were the Northwestern guy.
I'm saying in terms of finishing last.
Oh, you picked
Nebraska to finish last.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bet isn't who
Northwestern.
There are no winners among these two teams. The winner of the bet is who picks the team that finishes last. And remember you were sitting here. You're like, nah, Fred Hoiberg is going to be space and pace or whatever bullshit you were talking.
Yeah, Fred Hoiberg is going to finish 13th.
No, he will not.
Okay. It's a 0-0 tie early on, 2 weeks into the season. We're still waiting for a win. Are non-conference wins the tiebreaker?
That's fair.
That
That or Ken Palm ranking.
Ooh. What are they?
I think you have to go.
It needs to be the non-conference dubs. That's the only way to make it fair. We can't trust computers.
I'm very uneasy about Nebraska playing Southern and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Those are dangerous potential wins there. What's Northwestern got? SIU Edwardsville, Hartford, coached by St. Joe's grad John Gallagher, Norfolk State.
Oh boy, people are probably tuning out of this podcast at this point.
No, the most entertaining thing of the entire season will be following this bet. But
what's your pick for Ohio State Villanova? Let's hear it. That's the game I think of the week.
I'm going to take Villanova.
Ooh, I'm going Ohio State.
Okay. I don't know if Ohio State knows how to win these games yet.
Only against Cincinnati. They can win that game every year, it seems like.
Yeah. Put them in a rock fight against Cincinnati. They can win that. I don't know. No, I'm taking Villanova in this game. I'll take Villanova 71-68.
That East Coast bias.
That's right. Big five,
right.
Big Five bias.
Most people will listen to this after that game, so they'll be able to just laugh at us in the moment. They won't even have to worry about it. That's good.
As it should be. All right. That is going to do it for this week's edition. Dylan, Hoops this week. What do you got up there for the people to subscribe and read?
We have a lot of good stuff from last night's game. We talked kind of about those pick and roll stats. We talked a lot about Michigan's new ball screen coverage and how it tricked
That's right.
Creighton into shooting a bunch of mid-range jumpers. So a lot of fun stuff, and we'll have more coming up. What do you have over at theathletic.com?
We got a story that ran today on a lengthy conversation I had with Phil Martelli early this week about, what it's like to be a head coach for 24 years and then suddenly find yourself in an assistant role. I was kind of fascinated by that process of kind of reordering your instincts, if you want to put it that way. But that's kind of what he's going through, and he was open and honest, as he tends to be. So that was fun to do. That story's up there, and I'll obviously have coverage from Seton Hall tomorrow night, and working on something for next week that could be pretty interesting. So I hope to be able to tell the people more about that early next week.
Awesome.
All right. So that'll do it. Subscribe to this podcast. If you would be so kind to leave us a rating and, more importantly, a review. That helps us find new listeners. So go ahead and do that. And be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.